Afternoon. Unlike, I think, most of the rest of the speakers here today, I'm an expert. I know absolutely nothing about racing. And what I was brought in to talk about was social games, as in looking from the other side of the graph. And a lot of times when I give this talk, I'm talking to people who work in, say, specific sectors of the games industry, often very invested in specific sectors of the games industry, who know not too much about what's going on outside their circle. You find it all a bit scary, if you want that word, a bit confusing, a little bit like those sense of in the world. So I can't like to talk about what they are, sort of calm people down, even sort of basic, and they're actually quite simple little things, not such a huge threat. But also to talk about how, if you want to try and get into this market, if you want to try and work with it, you kind of need to understand the drivers behind it, how the people who are actually playing these games think and what it is that they expect of you, rather than necessarily trying to bring them into what you expect already. So I'll get into that a bit more and make a bit more sense in a second. So, what social games are? You probably think when you think social games, you think Facebook games. I mean, pretty much everybody does, but it actually encompasses a lot of background games, it encompasses a lot of what are called open web games or destination sites, which are games. It's a slightly amorphous name, in some ways it's sort of a slightly misrepresentative name, but it's definitely been the biggest movement in games in the last 5-6 years. And everybody who's working in the hard games industry, scrambling very quickly to try and get involved in it. Lots of company publishers and so on and so forth are trying to basically get in on it, even though they don't necessarily know what it is, they want to be a part of the fair, so to speak. So, first thing is, it's a huge market. There are, single alone, that's something like 207 million monthly active users on Facebook. That's not counting their Google Plus users, not counting their mobile users, it's not counting their users who exist on their own, say, farmville.com site or that kind of thing. Outside of those, there are a number of other companies like EA, like Disney Playden, CrowdStar, and a whole lot of much smaller companies underneath that. At the best guess, and it is a very rough guess, at least 600 million people through various platforms are playing these games in one shape, form, or another. Which of course is gigantic. Doesn't really speak to exactly how often they play, it doesn't really mean like that they're all hardcore players, they're not all playing every day, they're not all playing every hour. But they are all interfacing with these games on a fairly regular basis. And this is probably the most important observation about the kinds of people who are playing these games. That I think, listening to the sorts of things that are going on here today, is the most important thing you need to realise, which is that it's a very casual market. It's very what I call a muddle market. Muddle is somebody who doesn't really have time or attention to get their head into what you want them to understand in order to play. They expect you to change your product to fit their expectations. So a lot of Facebook games, a lot of social games, for example, take out a lot of hardcore elements that are typically found in the games that they're inspired from. City Build, to contrast with something like City. It's ridiculously simple, it's ridiculously easy to play because the models don't really want to get into sitting down and actually trying to figure out how to run cities. They just kind of want to build buildings. And want to collect coins, and they just want to make it to be a very, very light sort of process. The same sort of thing applies to basically all massively successful social games. There's no such thing as a hardcore social game. There's no, that's made angry more than a few users. There's no such thing as a social game that's managed to convince all of its users to learn how to play. And the biggest thing, I think, just as I say, if you guys start looking in, there's a lot of kind of discussion today about technological solutions. A lot of discussion about features, a lot of discussion about trying to involve people into the racing experience, to sort of throw them 3D video feeds and all this kind of stuff. And that's all kind of good, but that's not actually what models will be anyway interested in. They want you to simplify racing to the point that they understand it. The moment my reading of it is that racing is not okay, that's what it seems very, very sort of off the side from the sorts of games and social games play. That's the biggest thing to keep in mind. It's all talk today, questions, other observations. The other thing is most social games are single player, or at least they're called asynchronous, which means I don't have to be at a place at a time with a whole lot of people in order to play. Massively biggest misnomer about social games is that they are social. They're not really. They're actually more just posted on a social network website, and you just have to play it. If you're playing Farmville, actually, some of you play Farmville? Okay. When you're playing Farmville, most of the time you're just working. You're not actually sitting there chatting to people, you're not actually going like trading back and forth, you're not really doing a lot of things outside of what you would do in a PC game. It just happens to be within the walls
send gifts.
You can, but that's what I mean by, but it's asynchronous. It's not required. I don't need to be there. Yeah, I don't need to be there at the time that you're sending it. It's not required that we're in the same spaces.
Sorry, children.
So, I mean, from the point of view, for example, racing seems a lot of those around things like status, and space, like sort of pulling people together into the big kind of crowd experience. And again, that's brilliant, but the social gaming experience is actually the opposite of that. It's more like everybody's getting to run their own personal race day all the time, and you're sort of running the background and sort of trying to effectively provide them a fun experience that's completely single player, pretty much, but just maybe connect with various sites like we talked about. Social games also take advantage of that whole social graph, however you want to call it. They take advantage of the fact that people are connected to each other. So the reason why they work really well on Facebook is that there's a whole lot of people who've already established a whole lot of connections with each other. And successful games like these can exploit those connections in order to distribute and in order to form attention again and in order to basically get fandom going and all that sort of stuff. It's a real scale effect. If you get 1,000 people in your social game, you're tiny. If you get 1 million people in your social game, you're still actually pretty small. It's never just connect that well. And then kind of for somewhere around 3, 4, 5 million is where you start to see real proper social effects. You start to see things like gifting actually become valuable to a lot of players. Things like paying attention to what everybody else is doing starts to become valuable. And it's because the scale effect doesn't scale linearly. It scales exponentially. They're also persistent. Every social game you are building something pretty much all the time. Whether it's a stack of virtual pipe chips, whether it's your city, whether it's your farm, whether it's your Mafia Wars character, there's a kind of a persistence to how the game plays. There's an ownership that's involved in the game. So, unlike, say, a sport where it's quite an instant solid thing, I sort of place a bet, I see what happens, or that kind of thing, or I play a game, I see I get to the end, I win, I lose. These are they're continuous. There's no real kind of end point, there's no real kind of start point in some respects. There's just this kind of continuous building, small little goals along the way. How that works with betting, maybe it's things like, somebody mentioned stuff like fantasy leagues, being able to pull in the psychology of how fantasy football works, how it's kind of persistent, how you're kind of going week to week, the same team, trading things back and forth. That's kind of how I would see a social horse betting game of some sort of trying to work out, as though you're following certain sets of horses all the time, or you're following certain trainers, or you're following certain competitions, or that kind of thing. And building something within. Their retention there, a lot of social games build you to come back. Please come back. Plant your crops, you can collect them in 9 hours. Build your building, you can come back and collect rent after 24 hours time. This kind of game, it's often wrapped up in what's called an energy mechanic, but the idea is to kind of coax people to come back in frequently, like 2 times a day. So it's not so much play, go away. It's kind of play, remember here, until they eventually come back and then you kind of catch them all over again. They are free. Not to be underestimated, 95-ish or so percent of most players in most social games never actually pay a dime to play. They put up with the fact that the game hosts them and tries to control them to pay. They put up with the fact that they don't even necessarily get their hands on the sweetest virtual item. But the other 5% more than outweigh the cost of running for those 95%. My friend Nicholas Lovell, who's a blogger who runs cyclegamesfree.com, wants to talk about whales, which is kind of like high rollers. It's players who spend over $1,000 in a social game over the course of their lifetime playing. There are tens of thousands of players in Mafia Wars who have spent more than $10,000 in that game. There are tens of thousands of poker players in Zing's poker who have bought more than 10,000 worth of virtual chips within that game. So it's not necessarily the case that the spending of money within a social game has to be for the cash reward. In fact, there's none that I know of that try to incentivize people with actual rewards. It's all, again, back to ownership of property. I'm involved in the game, I'm sort of in its culture, I'm sort of like something into it, I'm kind of part of it. And that's the purchase motivator that gets a lot of people playing. They're also going mobile. There's more smartphones sold now than PCs. There's more things like iPads, things like tablets, things like the Amazon, yesterday, we know that the other. So the actual format, the games that work within different formats are a bit different as well. Things like Tap2, which is a massive success in the iPhone, doesn't really exist in a huge format on Facebook. Farmville exists hugely on Facebook, and it exists on the iPhone as well, but it's not the number one, it's not the global blockbuster. Angry Birds, to an extent, is sort of kind of social game, but not really. In that there's a little bit of virtual good There's a lot of kind of free content. Actually, a lot of players similar think a lot of free content for free. There's also social graphs. The iPhone 5 is best to come out and then and the weekend. And one of its key things is it's got Twitter integration. The iPad will no doubt have Twitter integration in the same way. It's a different community to exploit for the same reasons we mentioned with Facebook, with NetGraph, with the social graph, we have full tweet together. Only the Twitter social graph is a little less constrained in terms of policies, in terms of working with taxes, in terms of giving 30% of Facebook to just be allowed to sell things on their platform and stuff like that. So how that's going to exactly affect it, nobody knows, but it's the big movement. Oh, that's going to be a big change. So question. And there's open web games. I don't know if anybody heard of Big Point, but they run a series of games that are just on their own .com sites. They run games like Battlestar Galactica, they run games like Farm Run. They actually have 200 million users. They're nearly as big as Zynga, and they're nowhere near Facebook at all. They've established their own social graph. Moshi Monsters, which is probably the biggest success in the UK in the last few years, has its own social graph that it's created. Even tiny little games like Realm of which is for hardware games, is establishing its own little social graph. So there's a real kind of opportunity to think of betting or horse racing or all those kinds of activities and socialising without immediately thinking it has to be on Facebook. I have to deal with Facebook. This Facebook thing can't kill me. It's actually more the case that, and it's becoming more the case all the time, the games that are focusing on building their own communities and pulling their own users in and then connecting them as friends together has the same effect. It might take a little longer to actually build, maybe slower. But it creates a lot of lifelong customers. Watching makes ridiculous nice money. Big one makes ridiculous nice money. And even small games like Green Public, for example, have been trucking along for 40 years with very, very low customers who operate pretty much the same way. And so the real kind of takeaway is that social isn't scary. It's effectively just a function for people to connect together, to like things, to say, this is brilliant, I want you to know about this, I want you to know about that. It doesn't matter if it's on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on any particular network that you can think of. You could be building your own network and trying to pull your customers together in that way, and you would have the same effect as you would if you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, anywhere else. And it's probably the most interesting trend that's going to come out of the next couple of years, is that we won't really consider social games to be Facebook anymore. We won't consider them in terms of platforms anymore. We consider them in terms of themselves reaching into everything else. Thanks very much. This is Lee. If you want to follow more of my rantings. Thank you.